Good evening, and welcome to Beyond the Norm with Chip Reichenthal. This is a show that aspires to reach a deeper truth, help answer our greatest mysteries, entertain new thought and theoretical perspectives in science, metaphysics, paranormal, and other exciting realms. At the same time, on Beyond the Norm, we hope to highlight, feature, and endeavor into what we call the art of nice. As for humanity to truly prosper, each of us is and can be a vital part of the greater picture, a collective, harmonic, kind, and civil union that can carry us all into the new age, while building within ourselves a strong and inner peace. Knowledge is power, and a strong and vital element to becoming the best we can be. Your host, Chip Reichenthal, is a published author, veteran radio host with an unquenchable thirst for knowledge and finding the road to answers, or the things that mystify us all. We gladly welcome you to Beyond the Norm with Chip Reichenthal. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another very exciting episode of Beyond the Norm. This is your host, Chip Reichenthal, and yes, normally I open the show by saying good evening, but that's not the case with our very special guest, Danny Searle, who hails all the way from Brisbane in Queensland, Australia. And while here in the U.S. and New York, it's 9 p.m. on a Monday night, it's noontime Tuesday for Danny. We had Danny Searle on here before. He was our second guest ever for Beyond the Norm, and tonight he returns to the show in honor of his new book, which is called The Truth Chronicles, Book 1, Secrets of the Soul. And we're celebrating this book. We urge everyone to get a copy, because I truly and absolutely believe that Danny Searle is one of the world's foremost experts on the soul and characteristics therein, including and especially soul ages. And by that I mean if you're an old soul or a young soul. I'm sure you've all heard that expression when somebody is an old soul, when they seem wiser than their years. But here, Danny Searle has broken it down into categories, from infant soul on up to old soul, and even still broken it down further into 7 subcategories for each specific soul age. More than that is a very crisp understanding of the traits for each soul age. I'll tell you, his description of what the traits are for an old soul were the most precise description of me I'd ever heard, including from astrologers or psychics, doctors, psychologists, or anybody else who may have tried in vain to generalize me or anyone into categories. Danny Searle is a very gifted medium and psychic, and best of all is that here is a wonderful, gentle, and spiritual man, and he sees the world in a very similar way as I do, and we're halfway a world away. There's really something exciting in that, seeing some very close commonality in somebody who lives so far away in a different country, a different culture, a different time zone. And yet there is an urge in us to help share knowledge or wisdom, and the need for a kinder, gentler, and nicer vision of the world, our societies, and even our common realms of metaphysics or paranormal or science. Danny Searle is also granted a very good grasp of physics and chemistry, biology and genetics, and has sifted through all those realms have to offer and landed on an outlook some may see as outside the box. He has a great insight into the afterlife and to a thought that we might indeed, between each lifetime, select our own lives, our parents, what lessons to be, for lack of a better word, forced to learn or endure, in each of many lifetimes we each have on our path to ascension. For what is our reward after all those lifetimes, all those harsh lessons, and the wisdom that ultimately comes from them is a salvation perhaps 1,000-fold brighter and more joyous than any of us could expect, and the remainder of eternity at one with the greatest and most tranquil energy of them all. My personal experience with afterlife science or paranormal energy has taught me a lot, and yet my conclusions thus far are heavily laced with my own beliefs, perceptions, prejudices, as have Danny's years and decades, and we agree ultimately on most everything. And finding such a great mind and renowned expert and having him as a guest is affirming enough. But there's a thrill added to that mix when it comes from halfway around the world. Danny Searle has had great success with his YouTube channel called Path to Ascension. And I deeply believe our listeners would really get a kick out of the many videos that Danny has made on there, which takes some rather complicated subjects and makes them very easy to understand, as well as very relatable. And now, as we celebrate the release of Danny Searle's book, The Truth Chronicles, Book 1, Secrets of the Soul, we have a wonderful reason to have Danny back on Beyond the Norm, aside from the fact he's a terrific person and a valued friend. Danny has made some very valid points in his work, and I've embraced and often used to make a point or two. I really find useful his separation of the emotions we have, taking all those emotions and defining them into two main categories, love-based and fear-based, and he has a point. I've used that many times in describing the paranormal realm, how many paranormal investigators or talents come into the realm from a place of fear, where I came in from a place of love, with a best friend coming to me at the moment of his death and other friends and family members being among my first experiences, or in seeing how in TV shows there seems to be some need to amp up the fear-mongering, when in reality the malicious type of energies are a vast minority, and it is the most extreme cases generally highlighted for the camera. You'll also find metaphysics industry experts that are separated by love and fear and their outlooks and backgrounds. Danny Searle has also made it a point that, while seemingly obvious, still shakes you to the core if you think about it, that good and evil are human concepts and only entertained by humans. Such concepts aren't considered in the animal kingdom or plants or in universe with stars and planets, nor even by extraterrestrials in all the reports from those who have had contact or knowledge of them, only by people. But with good and evil only human, souls may not be. And if you take the time to watch animals on a steady basis, say from your home window, for example, to watch birds or squirrels or family pets, you can see after a while there's different personalities to them. Some go with the flow. Some are more social or trusting. Some are always the aggressors. Then if you take birds and see different species have general traits that differ from other species, and within each species different personal traits, it's easier to think of animals to have souls. Why shouldn't they anyway? Then with people and coming to understand how some live in pain of some kind, whether physical or emotional pain. And then with that pain, some will act out, some will be ever gracious. And what would give these folks the inclination to be one or the other? And also the fabled random acts of kindness that I call angel moments, to make somebody's day with a smile or recognition of their work. And these acts of kindness, or what we call here the art of nice, is something that has been a staple of Danny Searle's works, his motives behind his works, and it's an honor to recognize him for that here, and an honor to know him, and a great honor to celebrate his new book tonight, The Truth Chronicles, Book 1, Secrets of the Soul. So we have much to learn and embrace from our very special guest, Danny Searle. So why don't we get to that now? Hello, Danny Searle, and cheers, brother. We gladly welcome you back to Beyond the Norm.
And hello, Chip. And I was going to say, I'm your friend from the future.
I know, right? How's Tuesday so far?
Yes, it's going very well. Thank you very much.
I'm so glad to hear that. And it truly is such a great thing and an honor to have you back. And first off, and of course, you know, we want to talk about the new book, which we're very excited about. But since I see you as one of the world's foremost experts now on souls, soul ages, and afterlife, I wonder first some general things. What has shaped your knowledge and opinion on these matters over the years? And how have you come to know so much about soul ages?
Okay, Chip. Well, we have to go right back to when I was around the age of probably 5 or 6 years old. I started to have, I suppose, what you would call psychic intuition and being able to see spirit that was still earthbound, what people refer to as ghost, I suppose. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. At around the age of 14, I had my first experience of being taken out of my body, what people refer to as astral projection. It wasn't conscious on my behalf, but, you know, it happened. I found myself in this amazing place, which I later learnt was just basically the astral plane or the fourth dimension. Wow. it was at that point that really awakened something within me, that I knew that something wasn't right with the world. And, you know, at that stage, I was brought up in very sort of semi-strict Catholic upbringing. But, you know, I realized that the religions of the world weren't really giving us the answers that a lot of people were looking for. So I suppose from that period between, say, 14 and 21 years old, I did a lot of soul searching, reading books, things like that, but there was nothing really out there, nothing really that was pointing me in the right direction. And because this is in like the 80s, the mid 80s.
Yeah, hard to find good books about that sort of thing back then.
Yeah, and that was the days before the internet as well, you know, because it's very difficult to find information. So, yeah, then at about age 21 to 22, I was suddenly awoken one night in the middle of the night, and there was this man standing at the end of my bed. He was glowing, he was smiling, and he basically put his hand out and said, "Come on, it's time to go. It's time to go to work." That turned out to be my main spirit guide. Oh. And through a series, then sometimes once a week, sometimes 3-4 times a week, I would be taken back into the spirit world. For the next 2 years, this basically went on, where I was literally taken from the moment that you die right up to the moment that you're reborn, and every single level of the spirit plane, because as you mentioned before, like soul ages are broken down into 7 subgroups. Well, the spirit plane is the same. There's 7 levels on the spirit plane, and each one of them is divided again into 7 sub-levels, or different frequencies, if you like. So, you know, I was basically taken through that whole process, and the reason at the beginning why I was told was because they were having a lot of trouble with people dying and getting stuck on the earth plane because they were fearful. They were fearful of dying. And because the religion wasn't really giving them the answers, these souls would die and just get stuck there, and they'd go, well, what do I do now? I know I'm dead, but, you know, I'm not going into that light. I'm just going to sit here. And so part of what they wanted me to do was to relay the message that death was just a transition. That's all it is. It's just a transition. It's like being in a swimming pool and getting out of the swimming pool, right? You go from one sort of environment into a different environment, but your consciousness stays exactly the same. And that was the original sort of emphasis, was to help people not fear dying. Then later, as I progressed, you know, things got a little bit bigger, because then this massive consciousness shift was coming for 2012 that we all knew about. And we're seeing absolutely the results of that. Like, things are changing so rapidly now. And you know, and it was leading up to the 2012, of course. That's when I started making all the videos and things like that. And now, finally, I've finished the book, which the book is really like the videos. If you're familiar with my videos, they probably account for about 15 to 20% of what's in the book. So the book, I was able to go into much more depth, you know, much more detail on stuff, and talk about a lot of other topics that I didn't get to discuss in the videos.
Oh, good. Well, I'm you know, much more excited about it now. And you know, even if the book basically said everything that the videos have said, I would still get it and see it as worth getting, because, you know, then it's something right in front of you always. You know, it's hard to watch a video like when you're driving, for example. Of course, it's hard to read when you're driving too, so maybe not the best example, but I think you know what I mean. And wow, that. But back to your initial experiences, because I'm sure. Well, we've had some guests here that had some out of body experiences, the UBIs, I guess, if you want to use an acronym, and some people that have had near death experiences. And many people that had some psychic experiences at early ages. So some of these questions I now have are a little off script here, but based on your description, when you would have these meetings with your spirit guide, as you mentioned, and oftentimes would kind of drift away. You were never physically in a near-death state at that time, I'm assuming?
No. Oh, and something I probably should have said as well. Often, right, I would be taken out of body like you described, but then often, more often than not, my guide would manifest, literally manifest, not physically, but but in the room where I was. Like I'd be sitting in a room, and imagine I'm sitting at a table and you're opposite me. That was exactly how I would see my guide. I could feel their energy. I could hear them. I could talk to them. I could ask them questions. And a lot of the time, that's how it went down, was in that sort of face-to-face meeting.
Wow. I'm a little jealous there. I mean, I talk to my guides. I have 6, generally speaking. Some for different purposes at different times, but in general 6. Sometimes more, but never really with that kind of clarity. Although I think for I had similar experiences with discarnate energies, more so with my guides. At the time, I had been in an accident. It was new to me. I was kind of given this life sentence to live in pain for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And it was new at the time, maybe like 15 years ago. And I wanted so badly to die, really, that all the dead people would kind of say my life. They counseled me a little bit. These are people, some of them were suicides and murder victims, or just people that didn't want to face their own death, but didn't want to see me take my life. And so I have this kind of purpose now. I see it almost as a calling to represent spirit or discarnate energy in a good light, to help them if I can, or at least by reputation. I had one guy tell me that his death to him was similar to his birth. Initially, both frightening, where, his birth, all of a sudden he was in the warmth of this womb, and boom, he's out in the cold on this table. There's a scary guy looking at him, smacking him awake, and all he could do is kind of cry and pee all over a table, and and he said with death, it was kind of similar. He was buried. He said he stayed close to his body. He kind of had to see his funeral. He didn't want to, but it was kind of judgment day for living people on him. So it was kind of part of this lesson, if you will. And he stayed close to his body for a while underground, wasn't creeped out by bugs and stuff like that. And eventually the water, the rains came and wetted the dirt, and he could use the water to travel through the dirt up to the air. And once he was in the air, then he could really travel. And after a while, he said time, he could go forward and back in time if he wanted, and do all this kind of thing. And that excited me. And I watched some of these shows where they talk about some of the earthbound energies and how they're always evil or always malicious, or because you can't see them, they have the advantage on you and they're out to get you. And they're just there to make your life miserable. And that's, I think, kind of a minority of energy. So would I be wrong to say that?
Yeah, well, a lot of the stuff you've just been talking about, I actually discuss in depth in the book. First of all, but I'd just like to say, do you understand now, too, that your experience with your pain and things like that have now led you to where you are now?
Oh, yeah. I would think, well, they made me more spiritual. If I could live my life over again, I would take the pain, because I like where it's brought me, and I'd like that it's made me non-competitive, and I can't bring myself to hate anything or anyone. It's easier to let things slide, or to bring 1,000 judgments down to one bottom line. But I do miss, I can't connect like I used to with the dead, and I know they're trying to get my attention, and it really bothers me, but it's actually for the same reason. A lot of times I have to empathize with their pain. It's like I wouldn't know their names, but I would know their greatest wish in life, or see them as children in their rooms, children of abuse, looking out into the sky, dreaming of flying or being Superman, or just having ice cream, because these little things they could never get from the freedoms because they were so restricted and stuff. And I just, that kind of pain, I don't know if it's a temporary thing, but I'm stuck. I can't get back there, and I've been trying. And we'll have to talk about that off air, I guess.
Oh, yeah, no, well, I can quickly just say that you're very aware that when you're tuning into a radio station, okay, that there's different frequencies. Well, humans are exactly the same. We've got an auric field around us. We are electromagnetic by nature. So basically all you need to do is to retune your radio station, which is your body or mind, you know, whatever, to the frequency that those people are on. And the way that we do that, as I harp on and on and on about, is through meditation, right? Raise your frequency, suddenly your guides will appear. Suddenly you will be able to communicate with the other side. It's just that, as I said before, since 2012, basically the base frequency of the Earth, what we call the Schumann's resonance, has risen, and it's now much higher. Therefore, we need to rejig our system. We need to make our frequency go higher, and then suddenly they'll all be available again.
Yeah, I think part of it is, and it's again kind of an instinct in me, and you know, I don't want to make this all about me, but I have your ear, so I'm going to try. I think that with the shift in energy, that I think the living seem to, I don't know, I have more of a calling to them now, I guess, and it goes against my most primal wish, which is to bridge a gap, to help people, to including the dead and the living, and each with each other, you know, and with themselves. But it just seems that I feel maybe more of a purpose to speak to the living because of this shift. I
agree with that.
Got this tingling in my third eye that's kind of driving me a little nuts. But I mean, it's not like this next level tingle, but it's been there for over a year now. And you in your video talked really eloquently about the pineal gland. For the listeners, it's this small pea-sized thing in our brain, near our brain stem, that is thought of as the third eye. It basically helps us with metaphysics, with intuition and psychic ability and things of that nature. And there's been a lot of talk, which seems true, about fluoride in the water or other things that are part of industry or part of our culture now to blindly accept, kind of destroy our ability to use it. And we really have to use meditation, like you said, or other methods to kind of build that up. And yours seems to be very heightened. So, you know, I'm kind of glued to your words here because I feel like I need your help. But
the pineal gland is basically what I now call, it's just like a Wi-Fi adapter. That's what it is. It's like a Wi-Fi. People understand Wi-Fi, like you can go to a hotspot and hook up and get the internet on your phone and things like that. The pineal gland works exactly the same, except what it's connecting to is the spirit world, or interdimensional, really, is what it's doing. Mm-hmm. So by clearing it, recharging it, and working on it, it's just like tapping into a hotspot, and bang, you can start downloading information, you can communicate, you can do all that. But going back to what you were saying before, I absolutely agree with you that you are here now to focus on the living. I can assure everyone out there that the dead do not need our help, really, right? They've got hundreds of guides there helping them every single minute of every single day, right? They're never left alone. They're always got support and help there. Our whole focus of incarnating on Earth is to deal with being on Earth. We're here to focus on relationships. That's the main reason why you incarnate. Okay, it's only through relationships that we learn more about ourselves, and because you have to understand there's no negative energy whatsoever in the spirit plane, right? There's no such thing as negative energy. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I give a lot of examples in the book, like abandonment, for example. A child in India can experience abandonment, go through that process and that experience by the age of 12. if you tried to do that in spirit, it'd take you literally 10 million years, in Earth years. Because without actually experiencing negative energy, it's very hard to conceptualize it. And as I say, it's like, imagine, so right now you're in New York where it's very cold at the moment. And, just think if you were an Eskimo and you were living in the cold your whole life. And I said to you, imagine what it's like to be absolutely boiling hot and you're dying of thirst. Try and visualize that for me. I don't think you'd be able to fully appreciate it unless you've experienced it.
Unless you've experienced it, yeah.
That's right, right? So, and that's why we come to Earth, is to experience negative emotion, basically, and to turn it around, to work through it.
Which is a very excellent point. I also, I now write for Supernatural Magazine. It's an online magazine. And in the latest article, I talked about, and one of the other things I learned when I was attuned well as a medium is that because we've got this heart that beats twice a second on average, we're very time-oriented, almost enslaved to time, and our whole lives are sharply focused around time. Time to eat, time to sleep, and we're always in a hurry because we want to get to our destination on time. And the dead don't have that beating heart, nor do they still have any urgencies for the same things we find, especially emotionally speaking, urgent. The kind of gaps that we had in our relationships when the people no longer with us were alive was very, it was urgent to them at that time, but that urgency is like lost now, along with how you describe the negativity in that spirit world. They're not in a particular hurry at all for anything.
Oh, no, they're not. Well, we're actually getting into my second book that I'm working on at the moment.
Oh, very cool.
Well, I will be discussing the whole concept of time in that one, because just to give you a quick idea, basically, the whole concept of time came about what is now referred to as the fall of man, or the fall of Atlantis, okay, when that all collapsed. But it was all part of the bigger experiment. And the bigger experiment was that we wanted to separate ourselves from source and try and find our way back. That's what it's all about. So in order to carry out this experiment, right, they knew that there was some pitfalls. Now, prior, if you thought something, it would happen straight away. And they thought, oh, hang on, we can't do that. If we're trying to work through karmic relationships and positive and negative vibration, if, for example, we have an argument and you hurt me in some way, if I was to think, oh, I wish, a piano would fall on your head. Now, in this world with time, there's a delay before cause and effect. But if there was no time, it would happen immediately. That's probably not a good example of the piano on the head, but the idea is, that retribution. But I'm sure you yourself have been in a situation where you've been angry at someone and you're really, really angry at them, but then a month later you haven't seen them, but you've had time to calm down, think it through and think, oh, hang on, maybe they were right, maybe it's not that bad. That's why time was introduced, right, to create a delay between cause and effect.
Wow. What an awesome way to think about that. Oh, I am so happy I have you back on here. Well, it's so cool because, I've gotten, about 40 questions scripted out and haven't asked one of them yet, because just based on what we're talking about. And it's just wonderful to have audience with you again, brother.
Oh, no, now, it's great to be here.
do you something else that you mentioned, one more off-scripted question, and I'll try to get to some of the ones I got written. When you were talking about the guides and the things that they really needed kind of your help with as a living representative with spirit or discarnate, were you ever asked or counseled to cross any of them over?
What do you mean, cross them over?
Like the earthbounds, the people, the earthbounds that were stuck to take them into the light and cross them.
Yeah. That was one of my first jobs, in fact. That was one of the very first things I ever did, was help counsel people that were dying or who had died. So I'd be on the astral plane and I would counsel them on the astral plane and convince them to go into the light. Yeah, that was one of the very first jobs I ever did.
See, I used to do that all the time too, and I thank you for that. You know, a lot of people don't even think about that sort of thing, but you know, I was kind of there, and I realized the weight of how beautiful of something like that is, and thank you for that.
That's right.
I wanted to ask you something about living people, since most of our listeners are living, and, at least that I know of. Listening, I mean, I think that personally now, and some of this is pain. Most of my conversations or counsel of people is on a soul level, and you do so much work and have so much expertise in souls. So I ask you, you know, because if I ask how people are doing, I really want to know how they're doing and why. Why are they doing that well or that not well? And then maybe if I could help somehow, you know, it doesn't mean that I'm better than other people that don't do that, but it is a different thing, and it is a different way to connect with people on a daily basis. But it's a different visage. It carries into every conversation. And I notice you do that as well. So after a while, it helps you gain some wisdom on souls, of course. Do you think that you talk to most people on a soul level, as especially the living? And what does that mean to you to communicate on a soul level? And why has it happened for you, for living?
Hey, well, on a soul level, look, I try and just be me, whoever I'm dealing with, okay? But it really comes down to who you're conversing with or dealing with. I mean, I always carry out any transaction I'm in with love and compassion. I really do try and do that. But, you know, some people, the younger souls, are very difficult. They're hard nuts to crack, so to speak. So I'll deal with them on their level because they're most comfortable with that, right? And that's basically how I do it. I just deal with people on a level that they're comfortable with, because I can tell you now, if you approached like I talk about in the book, a fifth level young soul, that's your typical yuppie sort of go get 'em, you know, it's all about making money and blah, 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 right? If you try and approach them with spiritual stuff, they will, first of all, be like a deer in the headlights. They won't know what to say or how to deal with you. But then quite often they can become belligerent or belittling, you know, because they don't know how to deal with it. So what they'll do is fall back into base behavior, which of course is fight or flight, you know, and that's what they do. And I know in America, nothing against America, but you've got a large percentage of what I call the child soul, right? That's your Bible Belt people, the people that are fundamentalist Christians. That's another very good example. They will become downright belligerent if you try to, you know, come across as anything but the same as them. They can only deal with people the same as them. It's as simple as that. If I tried to go in, not even talking about spiritual stuff, but just being nice and blah, 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 they sort of become suspicious. You know, they think, oh, what's this guy up to? What's he after? You know, oh, this doesn't sound right. So I guess what I do is I just try and deal with people on a level that is comfortable for them.
Yeah. And, you know, I've been, well, I mean, living here in America all my life, I know a lot of people like that. I've tried to deal with people like that. I don't have anything against them, but it's hard for me to communicate with them on kind of a medium plane, if you get my drift. My question, though, since we're on that subject, is at least for my future reference, because I'm not in organized religion per se, at least not anymore, but I work very hard to live my life as a benevolent person, as a neighborly person, as a forgiving person, and also, if I can, try to set an example for humility, for niceness. You know, I mean, part of this show really is, I mean, there's so much here in the States. There's this reality TV, and it's really teaching or making interesting rude behavior, brash behavior.
Yeah.
And over time, people are kind of adapting to it. And
Or it becomes
even
the norm.
it becomes the norm, but it's also kind of driving them to act out. Um,
Hmm.
and so I'm trying to paint pictures or set examples of how positiveness begets positiveness, and good deeds actually come back around and make your life more joyful, and
Yeah.
create this happiness that is hard to find if you're living from negative to negative. I guess my question is, um, why am I not going for trying to live in a benevolent manner, but not praying the same way that they do,
Okay.
or going to church?
Well, okay. First of all, one of the annexes I've got in the book is specifically on where's hell? What happened to hell? It's the history of hell. And I won't go right into that, but, I did a fair bit of work of looking at the history of this whole concept of hell. There's nothing in the Bible, for example, that Satan in the original Bible is not even mentioned. There's a character called the Satan, and he was just really someone that used to knock around with God, basically, and they had a couple of bets with Job, and thus Satan said, I reckon he only likes you because, he's scared of you or something. And, they did this little bet. I relate it to the two old guys in, what's that Eddie Murphy movie, Trading Places.
Trading Right.
Yeah. Well, but that's what the Satan and Jehovah or Yahweh were. It's like those old men, But nowhere in the Bible is there anywhere that says hell's a real place or a physical place or a spiritual place. And nowhere in the Bible does it actually say Satan is this all-encompassing evil, thing. Nothing. And, I break it down a lot better in the book. But so basically, you don't need to fear hell. Hell is not a real place. It doesn't exist. What does exist, but, is some lower levels of the spirit plane, right, which are not very nice. But they're not very nice to, say, people like me and you. But if you're at that vibration, it's nothing new to them. They don't know any better. So when they're wallowing on those lower planes, to them it's just, it's just like being back on Earth again. Just they don't have to eat or drink anymore, even though they think they do and stuff. It's literally but a psychological thing. It's psychological entrapment. So if you die, let's say you were talking about suicide before, a lot of suicides when they die, they get to the other side and go, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. I broke the biggest rule of all. You shouldn't be doing that. And then they impose this guilt trip on themselves, which literally imposes their psychological state in a state of denial, where they will continually relive some episode over and over and over. And it's not until they finally realise that, hang on, this is an illusion, it's not real. It's in that split second, because the guides are there all the time trying to help them. At the moment that they cry out for mercy, or whatever you want to call it, or they see the truth of it all, that it's an illusion, bang, they're automatically taken out of that level, they go to the next level up. And they're usually taken into a healing place, where they're given intense healing and looked after. But no one's left behind. No one's thrown in a hole and just left there. That just doesn't happen. That's nonsense.
Yeah, and it was mostly Dante Alighieri and Dante's Inferno that really painted a picture of hell that was the church embraced. People were they were filling seats after reading that poem. Storied book, whatever you want to call it. But
and people have to understand
they went
indulgences, right? The church in the Middle Ages, by the 1500s, the Catholic Church was absolutely all powerful. And the way that they sort of got there was they used to sell indulgences. And an indulgence was, it doesn't matter what sins you did, if you pay us a large sum of money, we'll forgive everything and you're going straight to heaven. That's what an indulgence is, right?
Yeah.
And they literally built St. Peter's Cathedral from indulgences. So it was in their best interest to tell people that there's this place called hell, there's this creature called Satan. It was in their best interest to drum that into people's heads, because if people thought, well, sin's not real, it's only a concept, I'm not going to pay money, to get saved, then the church would be broke. So they're the ones that perpetuated this whole story of hell and Satan.
Right. And speaking of perpetuation, it perpetuated the Martin Luther to begin the Protestant Reformation, and King Henry in England actually went with it because the Pope wouldn't let him marry Anne Boleyn while he was already married to Catherine of Aragon.
Luther is actually an amazing man because he used to go and he would write down all the sins that the Vatican was doing, and he'd go and nail it on their front door every day. And they didn't like that. So that's when they sort of, tried to arrest him. And then he wrote his 97 treaties or whatever it was. And, he was quite an amazing man. And what he was trying to point out to them is that what you're practicing doesn't even remotely look like what Jesus was teaching, know. And he wanted to get back to the bare bones teachings of the early Gnostic church, early Christian church. That's what he was all about. So he was a man before his time. He was just an incredible man. It's a bit typical, the victors tell the history. So,
well, I mean, it's never easy to go against the flow. And there was this video about the quality of life as told by a 6-year-old girl. It was precious. I was on Yahoo or somewhere, and the girl said, if you're going to be a hero or you're going to change the world, then get used to things being real tough. Because if it were easy to be a hero or to be strong or brave, then everyone would be a hero or special. That from a 6-year-old girl. You touched on something that I just wanted to go over briefly. You were talking about suicides, and I know that in my work with them, counseling them back in the day, I too noticed it was more about, I think that they didn't understand that they ultimately had to forgive themselves. And it's so much harder to forgive yourself than it is somebody else. Just like it's harder to put yourself straight on something. It's easy to counsel other people, but it's almost impossible to counsel yourself because, you're so biased in that regard. And so that was very similar. And I also found in my experience, afterlife was really a place for like-minded people. So in that one level that's a little tough for some people, as soon as they realize that, and in an instant they're out of that level, they're still at, even when in that level, I think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, they're still in with some like-minded people, even in the lower levels.
Absolutely. That's all they're with, like-minded people.
I think the biggest fear, and look, I worked in paranormal a lot and still do, from time to time. And we always think, well, what's going to be proven first, ghosts or UFOs? And there's some extraterrestrial questions I will have for you directly, but I think UFOs is easier because if you accept ghosts, and you have to accept that there is an afterlife that doesn't really regard how you act while alive. And it'll be almost impossible, I think, especially to organized religion or government or people in power or desiring power, to how do you have people behave if they know that the afterlife isn't as strict or unforgiving as it's made out to be. I think that's the big question.
One of the things that does happen, part of the process of when you die, so you die, you go back to the spirit plane, you go through this and that. At a point, you go before what's called the spirit council. It's generally seen as 3 beings, Sometimes you might have 4 or 5, but generally it's 3 beings, right? And what they do is they do a debrief of the life that you've just lived. And they helped you at the beginning, right? When you were coming to Earth, they helped you pick the experiences that you wanted to go through, or the lessons, They help you pick them. So they know exactly what you went to Earth to do. So what they do is they look at how you went. Did you achieve what you went out to achieve? Did you get distracted? Did you just ignore it? Did you do this? Did you do that? Right? And it's certainly not a judgment. They just look at it like, a school teacher would look at, oh, how did you go this year, with your classes? It's more like that. It's not a judgment. And basically what happens is once that debrief happens, you will then experience every single emotion that you have caused on somebody else whilst on Earth. So if you live your life in love without fear, and most of the emotions that you give out to people are really nice, loving, high vibration, that's what you're going to experience. But if you are a negative, fearful person, hateful, and that's what you put out and that's what you make people feel, that is what you're going to experience. And it's from that exact moment of your experiencing all the emotions, that's what determines the frequency that you will be vibrating at. And that determines what level of the spirit plane you end up on. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense, and I think it should be. I should cut that recording out on the podcast and rerun it for everyone ever throughout all of time, and it's really more reason for anyone listening to buy the book, which I'm very excited about. The Truth Chronicles, Book 1.
Yep.
Secrets of the Soul. That's very exciting. And you're working on a second book, you said? Something about time?
Yeah.
That'll
be part of it.
Any idea when you plan to have them come out? And how many books are you thinking about planning?
Well, 3 books. And I explained in book 1, actually, I mean, this was originally going to be 1 book, but then I realized it would never get finished and it would be this big giant phone book sort of thing. And I thought, no, people don't want that. They're not going to carry that on a bus with them. So no, I decided to break it into 3 sections, and it's much easier for me, and I think it's much easier for other people as well. So the second is going to be looking at basically the dark side. What are we up against? Why is the world like it is? Why are things happening the way they're happening? Who's controlling? Who's pushing the buttons and who's pulling the strings, basically? And it's my intention to expose those people by naming names, and I'm not afraid of them, that's for sure.
Oh, wow.
But I think
hope you'll come back on when it comes out, right? Please tell me you'll come back.
yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
But yeah, the thing is, people can't begin to fix the problems of the world without knowing what they are, right? And so that's the idea. It's not about fear-mongering. It's about putting light onto the darkness. That's what I'm trying to do. And then the third book is going to be more, I guess, a practical, not all practical, but I'm explaining, go right into detail about how to meditate, how to raise your vibration, how to do this, how to do that, but also how in your everyday normal life you can live, like a guide, if you like. I mean, what try to eat or what try to drink, and this all sorts of practical solutions to your everyday life. That's what the third book's going to be concerned with.
I look forward to all of them. I mean, I'm very, just thinking about them, I'm very excited about all of that. And I have to ask, as somebody who hopes to be a light worker here, and by that I don't mean not working all of the, working lightly. Yeah. I mean, trying to spread some, the benefits of grace and kindness in a world that seems to be teaching these bad behaviors. How can we best help to get on that path to ascension, brother?
Meditate. That's a simple answer. Meditate.
Wow.
Proper meditation. And on my YouTube channel, I've got a basic chakra meditation. I probably need to update that with better audio quality. But look, at the end of the day, and look, some people can't meditate. They have trouble with it. And I'm not talking about a Zen Buddhist meditation where you've got to think of nothing. I'm a big one for visual guidance and meditation.
Oh, sure. Creative visualization. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. But then some people can't even do that. So then I say, okay, to start even from scratch, go and sit in the forest or go and sit by the ocean, right? Be alone and peaceful. Be at one. Just be. Just be. That's all you have to do. And by just sitting calmly in the forest or in nature somewhere, you will automatically start to resonate with the earth frequency, right? That happens whether you like it or not. It just will happen. So the more often that you go out into the nature and you start resonating with that frequency, you're going to find that it affects the rest of your life. You're going to become more calmer. Mm-hmm. You're not going to be fearful as much. You know, you're going to be able to think things through. And see, after you do that for a while, then try the meditation again, because it's just that meditation is like a really powerful way to do it. You know, it's a very quick, powerful way to get your energy and vibration up to the required level.
Yeah. And being out in nature, I think, is also great advice. And one of your videos, if I remember correctly, we're dealing with the frequencies of nature, that being the light, which is a wave, and sound, which is a wave. They are frequencies. And we have in our eyes and ears a limited range in accepting
Very
these
limited
frequencies. But we can open ourselves to wider ranges, which opens ourselves to wider frequencies in all means. And you hear about Fibonacci sequences and fractals and the forces of nature, and the ultimate, the highest power of them all is the force to which makes atoms move at the speed of light, or brings these light and sound frequencies to us in beauty, and emanates in beauty, and really adds to the experience. I think that is an excellent suggestion. We have less than 10 minutes, so I do have to ask. Wow, I know this is going by too fast. I do want to touch on extraterrestrials for a moment. We had a guest who makes documentaries about them, really, really good ones. His name is Robert Miles. And he had an experience, a benevolent encounter with an extraterrestrial. I ask you about extraterrestrials because in your work you do mention, it would not be the first time I ever heard it, where the human species, the origin of our species, may perhaps be some sort of hybrid, and terms like Anunnaki or Nephilim came up.
Absolutely. I cover
what brings
that
you to that? Have you ever had an encounter with an extraterrestrial? And if not, what brings you to that conclusion above others?
Okay, well, first of all, I cover probably 2 chapters on that very question of the origin of man and the extraterrestrial programmer called Enki that basically created humans as a hybrid. That information came to me originally from my spirit guides. Not exactly, they didn't say, there's this god called Enki and blah, blah, blah. No, they sort of said to me, I need to start looking into that. And I was like, it's just evolution. They said, no, you need to start looking at that. And that's what they say. They don't just give me the answers, right? They will point me in a direction, and then I'll go and research it. And then I'd get the research, and I'd go back and say, oh, look, I found this, what about that? And they go, yep, that's really good. Keep going, So that's how, and that's all the work of Zecharia Sitchin. But I sort of, in the book, I take it past what Sitchin has done, because one of the things that I wanted to do was explain how the soul ended up in those hybrid creatures, right? So I sort of cover that. As for other aliens and things, I've seen UFOs for sure, and I've seen extraterrestrials on the 4th dimension, which is like the astral plane. I've never really interacted with them, although I know that some of the best healers in the galaxy are extraterrestrials. And if you've got pain, you need to talk to your guide and say, I need healing, and please allow any expert healers out there to come through you to me, okay? And they'll do that for you. And they're usually extraterrestrials. But my only other experience, I was actually in England at one point, and I was going back about 1999, I think. And I suddenly woke up. I was completely paralyzed. I couldn't even yell out. And there were 2 grey aliens trying to drag me out the door, basically. But see, because I had all this prior knowledge and training and everything, I didn't freak out. If anything, I was like, what do you think you're doing? You little bugger. It was like that. And so all I did was white light myself, and they're literally like cockroaches. You know, when you put a torch on them, you turn the light on, they run. They
Yeah,
run.
they do. Especially when you have a pineal gland that is functional, they're not used to that sort of thing. And
No, that's right. Exactly.
another good reason to brush up on the meditation, telepathy, pineal gland, and all those things. But we've got 2 minutes left. I can't believe it's gone. I mean, it's gone by so fast.
Yeah.
But I have to ask about contact information. Where can people find more about Danny Searle, and where can we find the book? Even though I will say that as I post podcasts in my pages, I will add a link to the book. But best to hear it from you, though.
Okay, well, I've got a website now, which is just simply Danny Searle, all one word, .com, DannySearle.com. There's information about me, the book, all my videos, all sorts of things on there. It's sort of, I'll be working on that more as time progresses. But the book can be bought from Amazon. It's also available in Kindle. It's on iBooks and Nook, which is Barnes & Noble. So, you know, it's a lot of different formats available at the moment.
Wow. Well, that is convenient. Plus, you're on Facebook. And that is... I think people know how to spell Danny. It's with a Y, you know, just in case. And Searle is the last name of Serl. So find Danny Searle at DannySearle.com. And the book, The Truth Chronicles, Book 1, Secrets of the Soul. That also on your website?
Yeah, it is. It is, and the Kindle version as well.
Yeah, and available on Amazon.com also. That's and that's the link I'm going to put up, but I'll also add the website too, because it's worth it. Oh my goodness, brother! You know, it's not only an honor to have you back on, but we have to have you on again. So I hope you'll come on. You know, like 18 times this year alone. That would be great. I thank you. We've been listening to Danny Searle, and the book is The Truth Chronicles, Book 1, Secrets of the Soul. We will post links to that, and you can find it on Amazon and DannySearle.com. Next week, we will have Thomas Fusk